And we want to get reaction to this breaking news in Ukraine tonight with Charles Bierbauer. He is the former bureau chief in Moscow for ABC News in the late 70s and early 80s. Charles, your reaction to what's going over there tonight. We're getting some differing reports about what may or may not be happening.
Well, we don't want to begin to guess what is happening based on reports that are all over social media, but also are coming out from news sources. The Zaporizhia nuclear power complex is multiple reactors. It is just north of the Crimea, so that makes it southeast of Kiev. Chernobyl, you have to remember, is about 100 miles north of Kiev, so they're not in the same area. This is apparently the largest nuclear reactor complex in Europe, but exactly what's going on there, I don't know. Here's what I do know, and that is any nuclear event, whether it were from a reactor meltdown, such as is feared, perhaps, if this goes out of hand, or a nuclear weapon, any nuclear event in Ukraine has severe consequences beyond Ukraine. Let me give you a reason why I say that. In 1986, when the Chernobyl plant had its meltdown, Ronald Reagan, then president, was traveling in Indonesia and on to Japan, and I was part of the press pool accompanying him. And we were severely concerned about what was drifting eastward from Ukraine, across Russia, across Asia, and into places where we were. That's the way things happen. When Chernobyl melted down, the release into the atmosphere covered various parts of Western, Central, and Eastern Europe, as far north as Sweden. But any nuclear event in Ukraine is going to drift across Russia because the prevailing winds in Europe go west to east, and Russia is east of Ukraine. So what this tells me is, even in attacking a nuclear power plant, even with the potential of a nuclear weapon being discharged, Putin doesn't care. And obviously doesn't care about the losses that his own country might sustain.
As we speak of Putin, earlier today, the French president said he had a 90-minute phone call with Putin, and Putin told him that the worst was yet to come. The worst violence was yet to come unless the Ukrainian people surrendered.
Well, Putin would have liked an overnight surrender, and he could have claimed that he had liberated Ukraine, which was his pretense for going in there in the first place. But that has not happened. There's every good reason why the Ukrainians were fighting back, and every reason for Putin try to cover that up and not let people think that this is anything but according to his plan. There's enough evidence that it's not going according to Putin's plan, whatever the plan may have been, and that this is it's going to be a massive destruction and loss of life in Ukraine, but there are also going to be costs to the Russians.
As someone who lived and worked in Russia, do you think the Russian people are happy with all of this tonight?
You know, you never can tell exactly whether they're happy about it. The Russians have suffered immensely over the decades, particularly over the past century, that started with the Soviet Revolution back in 1914 and then on for another 100 years, or at least 70 or 80 until the Soviet Union broke apart. And they had to put up with Lenin, they had to put up with Stalin, they had to put up with Brezhnev until Gorbachev came along and started to change things. And he was succeeded by Putin, and people thought, well, maybe it won't be so bad. But quite frankly, my experience living with Russians, living among them, is that some will take this in stride as part of their fate for being Russians, and others will object and will strenuously object and will get out in the streets and will take their own risks in that regard. And we're seeing more of that.
All right. Charles Bierbauer, I want to thank you again for weighing in on this breaking news tonight.